Hey, Sens fans, welcome to the Senstennial Podcast. It's season 5, episode 19, and we're your hosts, Matt and Matt. And today we're joined by our special guest, Will Scouch. So, Will, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing well, Matt and Matt. That's I didn't even realize that's the thing we're going with, Matt and Matt. But I'm doing well. How are you all?
Could be better when speaking about hockey fandom, but I
Okay.
mean, I'm sure you knew that was coming. Um, other's
Just
doing
vibing.
swell,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, tough season, eh? How you doing? How you feel? Are you like you have summer plans already, or you're ready to just ride off into the sunset, or what?
Actually, yes.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
I'm
Okay,
getting out of Dodge.
He's
at,
getting out of the
at the
country.
getting as
yeah,
Out of
far
the
away from Ottawa as
continent.
possible, as
yeah,
far away from Canada as possible.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
If I come back and the CTC has morphed into a crater, I won't be upset. I'll be like, hey, new arena incoming. That's a positive. But yeah, getting out of the country for a month in June.
Okay.
So I'll probably miss the draft, but that's why we've got you on the show. Look at that segue. I'm brilliant.
Yeah, that's why I'm here, right?
um, but it has been quite some time since we've had you on the
Yeah.
show. I did a little check, and you know, a lot of the time I'm like, we don't want to talk about the draft when the Sens are doing well, but obviously that's not the case this season. And the last time we had you on was about a year and a half ago at the
Yep.
beginning of season 4. And we had optimism, the summer of Pierre, Claude Giroux coming into the fold, DeBrincat coming off a 40-plus goal season. Things couldn't be better. What was there to be worried about? And then everything
Yeah.
has happened since then.
Yes, everything has happened indeed.
Yeah, it hasn't been pretty. So
Yeah.
on that note, as it currently sits, Ottawa has the 5th overall pick if the draft was held today. Now,
Nice. Okay.
yeah, pain, but on the
Yeah.
other side, a great blue chip prospect to put in Ottawa system because they have really fallen behind when it comes to stacking the cupboards. Obviously, most of their talent from the draft is already in the NHL, and now maybe it's a couple depth players that they're looking to bring up from the system, but there's not a lot of high end talent down there in their minor and junior systems. So most Sens fans, I think, would agree that snagging a right hand defenseman in the top 5 of this year's draft would be ideal. Obviously, there's one guy in there who fits the bill, but that said, who do you think is the best fit for Ottawa to take in the top 5?
Well, the thing about Ottawa to me is they kind of they clearly, I think, still need stuff across the board. Like the depth forwards, I don't like watching the Sens this year from an outside perspective. The depth forwards, I don't think have been nearly good enough. Like they're decent role players, but the strength of the team is kind of the guys that are at the top of the lineup. Um, I would also I would be always very hesitant to draft players based on what you think your team might need. Especially if your focus this year is a defenseman. When I mean, I like a lot of this year's defensemen, but they're also very scary. A lot of them are spooky. And when I feel spooked about defensemen really high, usually, and when you look back on defensemen that were ranked really high in the draft, and a lot of them kind of settle into being solid NHL players, the ones that don't are generally the high octane, high skill guys. But if I'm the Ottawa Senators, I mean, yeah, like you said, there's not a whole lot of prospect depth in the cupboard as it is. I wouldn't expect any of these players except like any of the players likely to be Ottawa Senators at the end of the draft. I don't think are going to jump straight to the NHL. I'd be surprised. So you have some runway to play with. And I'm hopeful that, that the team can sort of fill out things around the edges before this player, whoever it is, at the top 5 pick gets to town. That said, I do think on my list, there's a strong 4 at the top. And then at 5, honestly, like every year at the draft, there's one draft pick where it's from then on, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea what teams are thinking. I have no idea what direction I would go because it's just there's this big group of guys, and who's the quote unquote best one of all of them. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. So, and I think the Senators, if they're picking fifth overall, are right there. Like that's the spot that scares me the most. But someone good will be there because I imagine one of the top four guys on my list will be there. I've got, so just for the record, I've got Ivan Demidov at 2, Berkeley Catton at 3, and Caden Lindstrom at 4. Now, from what I can gather, it sounds like a couple of guys going before 5 will be defensemen. So a guy like a Berkeley Catton or a Caden Lindstrom seems like a possibility. I would think that unless you really, 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 really want a defenseman, and you guys can tell me that that's what you really, really, really want, a guy like Caden Lindstrom, I think makes a ton of sense as a Senator. Big center, but he's got the skill and physicality and the shooting ability that you want. He can play intense hockey, but he's also got some finesse to him. He's been injured for a while, so I haven't seen him in a while, but and he's a little bit rough around the edges, I think, as a player. But in terms of raw talent, he's right up there with the best in the draft. And he could play whatever forward position you need him to. And when I look at the Senators, I think part of the problem is they still kind of need like a bit of extra oomph up the middle to me. Like you've got Tim Stützle, who I love. You got Ridley Gregg, who's been really good this year from what I've seen him. You've got Shane Pinto, who I think is really solid. But adding a guy like a Caden Lindstrom there to sort of slot in with Gregg in the middle of the lineup could be really something, or just steal the second center spot. And the more good centers you have, the better. But if you're looking at defensemen, there's a bunch of options that are fascinatingly very different. And I mean, and we can get into it, but there's a few of them, right? Like I would probably think that a guy like Levshunov is gone. Maybe a Dickinson is gone by then. But, if you're left with a Zeev Bouillon or, and I'm not sure he's a great fit for the Senators. He doesn't really.
Yeah.
It's really
I don't
tough.
think he is.
It's tough too, because the guys who run the show in Ottawa are different, but all the scouts are the same. So it's going to be really difficult to sort of predict which direction they want to go. I doubt that a guy like Adam Jiricek would be on the table as such a risky pick, but I really like him. And I think that the concerns about him this season from playing in the Czech Pro League are a little bit overblown when you think longer than what you're seeing in front of your face. Like you give him 3 years or so and you'll hopefully get a pretty solid defenseman there. And if those guys are gone, I don't think I'd just reach on a defenseman because you feel like you need it, like an Anton Salayev, right? Like I think that guy is as raw as it gets. You're drafting him because he's a unicorn of a player, but very rough around the edges too, right? Like, so to me, if it's Ottawa and they're 5th overall, and I would imagine the top 5 is something like Celebrini, Dickinson, Demidov maybe, and Levshunov, then you have a pick of some interesting players. But I think the one that I would look at is maybe just go for a big, super skilled center in Caden Lindstrom, who is in and of himself a bit of a unicorn on his own.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And you do raise an interesting point when it comes to centers and Ottawa, right? Like when you look at Ottawa's center depth, Tim Stützle is not a huge guy. He's like 6 feet tall. Obviously, Pinto and Ridley Gregg aren't huge guys either. Ridley Gregg comes in under 6 feet. Now he plays very fierce, but of course that doesn't mean that he is a big guy. So picking up a centerman, like you said, with Lindstrom, I think is definitely of interest, especially when you look at some of the top power plays around the league and using those big guys in front of the net. Brady Tkachuk's pretty good at it. Adding another guy like that, who I imagine, and I love Brady Tkachuk, but is more defensively responsible as well, would really help Ottawa. So definitely something to keep in mind. And like you said, I think that second line spot is open depending on what happens with Josh Norris, whether he's on LTIR for quite some time, if the Sens try to do some offseason move to trade him elsewhere. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. His contract at the moment is likely hard to move because of his injury history. So we'll see what happens there, but certainly a lot of interesting options.
Yeah, and the other thing about Lindstrom that also, like, he's a center generally when he plays. I've seen him play winger as well this year, but if it doesn't really, like, he could have the Quinton Byfield development path where Byfield had similar concerns when he was draft eligible about managing the puck and being a little bit more of a functional part of a line rather than just a very, very talented individual player. And I think he's sort of settled into a really nice role as that first line winger for LA. And if Josh Norris does come back, and if, Ridley Gregg or Shane Pinto are what some fans think that they are, and like could really lock in that number 2 center position, and Lindstrom becomes a winger that plays off of some of these guys, like Claude Giroux is not going to be here forever, right? Dominic Kubalik, he's going to be gone,
Sorry, who is that?
Yeah,
Do they
exactly.
play
Like,
for the Sens?
Exactly. Like there's room on the roster on the wings here, and we set off the top, right? Like there's not much coming in the way of young players, I don't think, that I would say are a lock for an NHL job, at least not as a top 6 player. So if you aim for a top center in a guy like Lindstrom, but end up with a really good physical, skilled winger, and he can just play at both ends of the ice really well, like a Quinton Byfield has with LA, I think that goes a long way for the Ottawa Senators to sort of fix what I think has been a major issue for them. But either way, I just think that's where I would look first. But that's also because I'm a little bit cooler on the defenseman this year than a lot of other people, I think.
And speaking of cooling on defensemen, I think two guys that Sens fans and our listeners are probably thinking about are Zane Parekh, who's clearly an offensive dynamo in the OHL, and somebody who's been described as also scary is Carter Yukemchuk.
Yeah.
Both of those guys have drawn the attention of Sens fans specifically because they are right shot D, and the Sens have a plethora of left shot D, and we need to bolster. So what can you tell us about those guys?
So the Ottawa Senators pretty well. What is the major problem? They are allowing too many goals.
Yeah.
Those 2 players that you mentioned, I don't think really help you in that department.
Okay.
You look at a guy, you've got like Thomas Chabot and Jake Sanderson, and maybe Chychrun beyond this season, who knows. I just, again, I think the Ottawa is a team where the depth really hampers them, but both of those guys, especially Parekh, I think are not going to help you in that department. Like, I don't know. I know some people have said that the concerns about Zane Parech's defending are a little bit overblown, or that the offense outweighs the defense, but I've watched and when people say stuff like that is so against what I think, I have to double check and check. So I've seen Zane Parekh maybe 12 times this year. Like because I just can't believe that an NHL team would set aside the issues that are there that I've seen and go, especially because with the offensive tools, right? Like, what I've been telling people about Zane Parekh is like, there's kind of at this stage of a player's career around the world, there's like two types of offensive defensemen, right? There's the one who is that Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar style, right? High skating level, high mobility, involved at both ends, great quarterback up the ice, can pinch up in the offensive zone, that Roman Josi type as well. I would say like you're hoping that you're getting like a Roman Josi type out of Zane Parekh, but you look at Roman Josi and you say, well, if you take away the power play time and really sort of look at his defensive numbers as well over his career, they're not great, because he doesn't really have that mobility and physical intensity that can really sort of shut down a defensive situation or a rush defending situation. With Parekh, it's like there's a lot of guys who are offensive defensemen of the other kind that have been drafted in recent years where they're not the best skaters, they're not the best physical defenders, they're not, they read play pretty well, and I think Parekh generates a lot of the offense from doing that whole thing of drawing pressure. He has a good idea of how to draw pressure away from a guy and open space for someone that way and play around with that, and that's kind of a sort of smart offensive way to play. It's either that or he's shooting it from the point. And to me, I look at that and I go, okay, but that's where the interesting things for me end with him. And he's getting away with that a lot because of how good his team is and Yakimchuk is a little bit more of an extreme version where it's just shoot, or he will step up from the blue line with the handles that we've seen in GIFs on the internet all the time. But the thing I noticed is that he's doing that at about 5 miles an hour, right? Like he's sort of baiting guys in to then deke them out. And I just don't know if NHL players are going to let him do that as much.
Right.
And if you give up the puck trying to dangle a guy at your blue line to step up into the offensive zone, they're coming the other way. You know, you don't want to be coughing the puck up anywhere near the offensive blue line. So to me, it's like I see a lot of these defensemen over the years who kind of have this pass first, you know, lower pace offensive game where they score a lot of points. Guys like Ty Smith or you know, Adam Boqvist, even, who was more of a shooter. Or you know, I'm trying to think of other ones, you know, and in some cases those guys kind of work out. Like Timothy Liljegren maybe would have been a good example too a few years ago, but Toronto has sort of reworked him into a little bit more of a two-way guy and developed him a lot physically. And maybe that's the case for those two guys, but that's not really what you're drafting them for, I don't think. And I think that you're making a huge bet that their style of play completely shifts. So again, like, there's a lot of defensemen this year that have styles of play that kind of spook me. And it also comes down to what you're looking for out of what a defenseman is supposed to do, you know, right? Like, what is their job? You know, do you want them? And I think I've said this to you guys, like, when you look at an NHL player, or a prospect, I should say, like, it's important to know, when are you most interested in them? To me, if you're most interested in a defenseman when the puck is in the offensive zone, then to me, that's a red flag, because that's not what their principal job is. Their principal job is getting the puck back, moving it up the ice, get the puck back, move up the ice. The offense is a bonus. So, and with the moving the puck up the ice and getting it back, both of those guys you mentioned, I think, are really problematic. Like, Yakimchuk is bigger. He's more physical, much more physical. But outside of that, he's also, you know, not a very good skater, not very mobile. And, you know, it just, to me, those two guys just, if you're drafting them top 10, I just think you're taking on a lot of risk. It's not impossible that those guys turn out to be good NHL players, but they have holes in their game that are pretty big. And again, I think there's just other players out there that you could either get later and turn out to be a useful player, or you could just go with a forward and end up with something that could fill just as big a hole on the lineup.
Yeah. Now we've talked a lot about different holes in Ottawa's lineup, and obviously you can pinpoint quite a few areas, but one that we haven't touched on yet is inside the crease. And of course, Ottawa's goaltending has been subpar this season, even with league average goaltending hovering around .899 this season. Both of Ottawa's primary goaltenders in Forsberg and Korpisalo have fallen well under that number. So now, obviously, when you look at goaltenders in a draft, you don't expect any goaltender, whether first or seventh round, to step into the NHL right away. But looking at the goaltenders in this draft class, are there any who you could say, like, yeah, and I know goaltenders are hard to predict, but
right,
any maybe that you see have certain tools that you like and have NHL upside that you think could, you know, go anywhere in the draft?
I mean, so this season I've actually made an effort to, like, reach out to people and try to learn a lot more and read a lot more about goaltending and watching more high-end NHL goaltenders of, you know, what it is that they do that makes them so useful and makes them such good puck stoppers and all of that stuff. And obviously there's no one way to do it. But when I go back to the draft class this year and sort of look through the guys that are out there, I mean, there are decent goaltenders out there that are very athletic. I think read play really well, follow the puck and track the puck really well. And, you know, just play a more technically sound game that could project pretty well. I don't think I'd use like a top 2 round pick. Like, Ottawa has 2 first round picks this year, it looks like.
Correct. Yeah.
And a second round pick. I don't think I'd use any of those on goaltenders. You might, you know, like an Emil Vinny, who's a Finnish goaltender, might be a guy you take in the second round, but he might be a guy that I feel like in the draft this year, you could get 3 really good skaters in the first 2 rounds and then maybe worry about goaltending later. rather than pass up on a talented skater and take a goaltender and try for skaters later. You got 4 4th-round picks, I think it looks like.
Yeah. The one Ottawa could end up. Oh, actually, sorry. It would be a third in 2026. So,
okay.
Right now,
yes,
4
true.
4th-rounders, but if Florida wins the cup, then that 3rd-rounder gets pushed to 2026.
So we'll say 3.5 4th-round picks, right?
Love it.
And I think one of those, sure, you could take a swing on a goalie. It's just I always find and I think that usually the place I always look for goaltenders, it seems like, is Russia. Like Russia has some weird, I don't know what they're feeding their goaltenders or what, but some of them have been really, really, really good. A guy in Canada, like an Evan Gardner, who I think could go pretty late in the draft, but probably shouldn't. Like he's a Saskatoon goaltender. I like him. Maybe that's a guy you pick in the middle rounds of the draft and see what he does over the next few years. Pavel Moisevich is a goaltender playing pro in Russia who's been excellent all season long, facing pretty easy workloads when you look at the data on him in St. Petersburg. They're a pretty dominant team, but he's still performing quite well. So there's options out there. There are interesting ones out there. And if you're looking at, I mean, especially for Ottawa, where you've got 4 picks in the 4th round this year, probably, or maybe 3. Sure, right? Like if you have 5 skaters and you're in the 4th round, and you're like, all right, yeah, like let's take a swing on a goalie. There's probably going to be one available that could be quite useful. And I think there are some out there that are interesting bets that have some good underlying numbers to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously Ottawa, at least under the Pierre Dorion regime, they would draft 1 goalie every draft without fail. And I think it's just, if you have draft picks, throw the darts on the board. You never know. Obviously, Joey Decord has panned out into being an NHL goaltender, and he was taken in, I believe, the 6th or 7th round one year. Gustafsson, I know he came over from Pittsburgh and was a 1st-round pick. He's a guy who panned out. Sogard, taken in the 2nd round. He needs to improve, but he's still young. He's got time to grow. He's had some good stints in the NHL, more so last season than this season. But yeah, I think that's kind of Ottawa's MO is throw a dart at the board on a goaltender and see how they develop.
Yeah. And that seems perfectly reasonable. I mean, that's kind of the way you do it. If you really want to get goaltending through the draft, I'm a little bit more on the side of just pick up the scraps elsewhere and hope it works out and cross your fingers. But also goaltending is such a mental thing too. Like it depends, like there's so many factors that it depends on. So I don't know, you may as well take one especially when you have so many picks in the middle of the draft, you may as well just say whatever, like let's see who's available. And I mean, sometimes really good goaltenders just slip because teams don't really prioritize them as much. Like a Jacob Fowler last year has already kind of shown that being a 3rd-round pick was not really the right call. But Montreal seems to have picked up a pretty good option. So again, they're just really hard to project. And that's the other thing too. You mentioned Mads Sogard. Like he's only 23. A lot of goaltenders, like look at Joey Decord. You said him, but he's not being great with Ottawa, right? Like I don't know why it wasn't him in Ottawa that turned out to be this. But you never know until right? I don't know. It's just it's the crux of a good hockey team, right? Show me a bad coach and I'll show you a bad goalie. Show me a good coach, I'll show you a good goalie, right? You could live or die by the guy. And so if you don't have a good one, you're screwed. But it's hard to find a good one that is good year in and year out. So I guess my approach is focus on everything but goaltending and just try to score as many goals as you can. And then your goaltending is a little bit less important, but then it's sort of a secondary thing. But that's just me.
Oh, and correction, I'm pretty sure that Gustafsson was actually taken in the 2nd round. I don't think he was a 1st-rounder. That's my bad.
Oh yeah. You're right.
Yeah. But speaking of goalies and when they should be taken or haven't been taken in these 2 guys' cases are Hugo Havlid and Simon Latkoski. They're both overagers entering. I think Havlid, this is his 2nd draft, and Latkoski think that's how it said. This is his final draft. Do you think there's any merit to taking those guys? I know Latkoski has really put up some impressive numbers at Omaha. Havlid himself, he had an excellent World Juniors save for the last game.
Yeah.
And then has been seemingly solid in the Allsvenskan. What do you think maybe just tossing a 7th rounder at those guys looks like?
Ottawa doesn't have 7, but I mean, for
Oh,
any other
Jesus.
team,
They have a 6th. Yeah, they have a 6th, but no 7th.
Spicy.
Honestly, those two guys, I'm more familiar with Havelid because I watch a lot of Djurgården in Sweden, and I don't know. I'm you know me. I'm not a big guy who values or judges players based on size, but I kind of do with goaltenders. Like, goaltending sometimes is a game of inches and athleticism. And if you don't have one, you better have a lot of the other. And if you don't have the other, you better have a lot of the one. So for me, I mean, it's so rare in the NHL to have a successful goaltender that is under 6'2". Like, it's so rare. There's maybe one or two that year over year you can really depend on. I look at Havelid especially, and I struggle. Like, you watch him, like, the metrics that I have on him for goaltenders are not particularly great this season. I just don't know if I'd go there. Latkoski, I don't really know. But I just think that with him being a 2002, you either try to sign him as a free agent, because I doubt he gets drafted, or you just look elsewhere, because, like, there's a couple of big goalies who save a lot of pucks and face some pretty decent workloads that you could take a swing on. There's a couple in Russia. It's funny when you look at the real trash teams in Russian junior hockey, some of them have really good goaltenders because they're facing 40 shots a night and saving 36 of them or 37. Yeah. So it doesn't look good in terms of save percentage, but you'd sort of dig a little deeper and you go, okay, this guy's getting completely shelled and torched, but figuring it out. So it just really all depends on what you think the goalie's capable of. But those two guys you mentioned, I don't think I would look in that direction, at least not right now.
Hey, fair enough. I mean, if you can get a free asset and you can sign one of them, that's great. Even just I know the Sens have invited quite a few people through tryouts, for example. Yeah. But I feel like you can never have enough goalies, especially especially good ones, and it doesn't seem like Ottawa has that right at this moment. What about Brizgalov's kid?
That is one I haven't seen at all, because I don't think his league makes a bunch of tape available, so I can't say I've seen him. I don't think, but I mean, the fact that Ilya Brizgalov's kid is maybe on his way to the NHL is insanely hilarious to me. I love Ilya Brizgalov's vibes, and I mean, I don't know. I'm just a huge fan regardless. I imagine he'll probably get picked because NHL teams probably can't help themselves from drafting bloodline players. And honestly,
Ottawa Senators. That's our thing.
Maybe that's the guy, right? Maybe that's the thing.
In the COVID year draft, man, the amount of teams that just took brothers of the players on their rosters was hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Cale Makar's brother got drafted. I think he has 1 point in the NCAA since going there. So, being a little bit reductive, but.
And you got Colton Dock, and then Chicago.
Colton Dock.
And then, Kirby got traded. But anyway, so moving on. Ottawa also owns a conditional first-round pick that they got in the DeBrincat trade from Detroit, and that'll likely end up being Boston's first-round pick due to the conditions on it. Now, unfortunately, Boston decided to not fall off this season and has been torching the league, and Ottawa got to see that on full display the other night, unfortunately.
A little bit, yeah.
But, if that pick ends up landing in the late 20s or potentially even the early 30s, who do you think would be a worthwhile player for Ottawa to go after in that range? Is there anyone who you think slips the end of the first round, maybe into the early second?
Well, I mean, there's always those players. Every year there's players who I think are very talented, but probably need some, direction and development and might give coaches a headache, and maybe minimizing that moving forward could be good. But I mean, I think at the end of the first round this year through the second round, there's going to be just a lot of that kind of thing. I mean, there's going to be a lot of options, I think. If I'm putting on my Ottawa Senators hat, maybe an Adam Jiricek falls all the way to that pick. And honestly, with a pick,
dream worthy.
But I mean, people didn't like him when he was playing in Czech. I thought he played great at the World Juniors before getting hurt. I doubt he falls all the way there, but you never know. If it's, a team under the pressure of you don't want to screw up your first round pick, don't draft the kid who blew out his knee. I don't know. Maybe that's going to get some teams. But if I'm putting on my Ottawa hat and really trying to think like them, I think maybe a guy like Emil Hemming comes to mind as maybe a late first round pick for them. Like a pretty big but skilled, powerful winger guy who's got a pretty good shot. Not the flashiest guy. He doesn't sort of jump off the ice at you, but definitely could get involved and play really well and play really physical. A dark horse guy in that range I'd throw out there if I'm Ottawa is a Stian Solberg, a Norwegian kid who hits like a truck. Really good skater as well. Decent puck mover as well. Like he's a pretty well-rounded player. He's been scoring some points in the Norwegian league this year at a pretty good rate at even strength. Granted, it's not the best pro league, but he's playing. I mean, he's playing on the team that you could consider like the insert most popular NHL team, whatever, of Norway with Vålerenga. And I've really liked him more and more the more I've seen him all year, especially when you sort of watch him and then watch other guys that are defensemen that might go in the late first, early second round. And I'm going, okay, this guy's already playing pro hockey and I kind of like him quite a bit. And these other guys are playing lower levels and I have more question marks. But I've really, really liked him because, again, like, what are you looking for in a defenseman? Like, if you're looking for a guy who can get around the ice really well, erase guys from pressuring your goaltender or just be in the right spot and move the puck decently well, I feel like Solberg's a really good case of that. And I feel like with time, you could end up with a pretty solid guy. Or Dominic Badinka is another one that comes to mind as well, like a late first round pick. He's a guy he's earned his job with Malmo. He's playing pretty good minutes in the Swedish Pro League. And I don't think he's looked out of position there at all. Really good skater, just monitors play really well, a smart defender who can, he's got some offensive tools, even though he's only got 4 points against men this year. Like he kind of set that aside if you're looking at prospects. So I think there's going to be some good options sort of across the board that you could sort of take a swing on. There's going to be a lot of fun, just raw fun players available in that range. I think guys like Andrew Basha, who else could be there? Luke Misa will probably be there. Teddy Stiga will probably almost certainly be there. Those guys are all small, but they're all tons and tons of fun. And I think they're all really, really good. So they'll have a lot of options, both for sort of putting on your Ottawa Senators hat and putting on the maybe just take the best player and cross your fingers kind of hat that you can pull out once in a while.
I mean, Ottawa's due for like a hell of a draft, right? I mean, they got it.
So, I mean, at some point, you gotta hope, right? Like, yeah.
2020 is getting far in the rear view at this point.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Yeah, and the last three have been quite forgettable.
I like Theo Wahlberg. He's pretty good. I like him.
Halliday, I think, could be
Halliday's
nice
okay. Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, he could be a guy.
Who's a big one that they drafted in the second?
Oh, Nordberg,
third.
Philip Nordberg.
No. Third this past draft. He plays for not Harvard.
Oh, Hoyt Stanley.
Yeah, Hoyt Stanley.
Yes. Yeah, Hoyt. I like Hoyt Stanley. But he always was gonna be a guy where it's like you leave him in college for 3 or 4 years and then see how he does. Like really, really raw. But really, I liked him a lot last year. Was he the first guy they drafted last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah.
And I could see why. Like he's in his own way, like a big swing on potential. Granted, he's playing Ivy League hockey and wasn't like shooting the lights out there, but his deeper numbers look pretty good. So I don't know. I've liked Hoyt Stanley a lot. And, I don't think it's like my numbers, the database I have, the Ottawa Senators don't look so good, but I don't think it's as bad. And I think a few of these guys might find their way into sort of depth down the lineup roles, which, I mean, for a 4th, 3rd, 5th round range player, like you can't hope for much more than that, right?
And it feels like outside of Batherson, the Sens have gotten a lot of credit for finding those late round gems when it's not happening nearly as much anymore. And then you see them making picks at places that should be a safe pick. And, it obviously just doesn't turn out at all.
Right.
I feel like that 2021 draft, everybody is gone from it except Tyler Boucher.
Wow,
Ben
really?
Rogers gone, Chandler Romeo's gone, like all of these
Zach
guys.
Ostapchuk.
Yeah.
Stopchuk's money.
He's looked
fit in already.
He's looked good so far. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think
that said, I wouldn't have been upset if Ottawa took this guy. You might know Logan Stankoven. I hear he's pretty good.
Never heard of him. I don't know. Wouldn't have been me.
I feel like it absolutely would have been you.
Will was totally on the Stankoven hype train.
Oh, definitely. How could you not be?
13 or 12 on my list or something.
I feel like Will would have been yelling at the screen every time a team took anybody else in the second round until he finally went.
I was. Yeah. I know. Like, he's so funny. Like, every person, like across the board, everybody, every scout I talked to, everybody, except the oldest ones, were like, he's sick. He should not have gone 47th. Even the ones who I disagree with on a lot of things, they're like, Logan Stankoven rules. So for him to be a mid-second round pick is insane. And it just seems that people being scared of how small he is, kind of won the day for a lot of teams. I think I did the math and like 26 teams passed on him. I think Detroit passed on him 3 times. So anyway,
thankfully,
besides the point, right?
Yeah. I also think like maybe scouts should realize like more often than not, there's always this one player in every draft. It feels like every draft that is undersized, but puts up monster numbers in the WHL or the OHL or wherever. And everybody's like, oh no, we can't take him. And then suddenly he's Braden Point and he's scored 50 goals in the NHL.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that, I watch a lot of players, and a lot of them are small. A lot of junior players are small, and a lot of productive players can be very small. And I think that, like, I agree that there is a concern about the size of players, but it's not about the number on the page that I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is how they use their style of play. Like Logan Stankoven, you would never, he looks like a 6-year-old out there, but if you kind of squint and sort of make him more of a blur like everybody else, you could not pick out him as the smallest guy on the team. I don't think. Like he is a dog on a bone. Like that guy pursues the puck, he hits guys, he plays hard. And that's, and then when he's got the puck, he's lightning quick, really skilled. And that's what you need out of those small players. They need to overcome that disadvantage physically to get what they need to get done. And the same is true on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Just because you're 6'8" doesn't mean that you're going to do anything really, right? Like it's a disadvantage almost to be that big, and being able to work with it properly and develop it and utilize it the way it needs to be used, whatever that might mean, whether it's Matthew Rempe or Quinton Byfield, right? Like there's different ways of being that big and playing hockey.
Big Z.
Big Z. One way or the other, a guy like Logan Stankoven, it's such an interesting barometer for me now, where it's like if I'm looking at a guy who's 5'7", 5'8", I think I can pick out when I'm kind of going, yeah, maybe they score 100 points in junior, but I don't know if a coach is going to trust them. But then there's a bunch of guys who are 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", and I'm going, yeah, I think I would, take a swing on this guy, especially when it's, 60th overall, or in some cases probably this year, like way, way later. Timur Mukanov was one of those guys last year for me, a guy who was drafted in the 6th round. I think he's listed 5'9", and I think he's been one of the most productive draft year +1 KHL guys in the entire draft this year, outside of like Michkov and I think Mikhail Ilyin, but he's his teammate. I don't know. We're getting off track, but you see my point.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about players that may get overlooked for one attribute or another, there's also players who get overlooked just because they play in a league that doesn't get as many eyes on.
Yep.
Maybe not televised, like you mentioned earlier with Brizgalov's kid. Are there any players that you've gotten to watch or at least track this year who maybe play in one of those leagues that generally is underrepresented in the draft who you've liked?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Solberg earlier. I think Solberg's a good example of that. Really deep down the well, I don't think there's a whole lot this year. Like if we're looking, like I know, for example, Ottawa drafted Nikitin last year out of Kazakhstan. It was funny watching him with the Kazakh junior team this year. He was great in the there. I think he's going to be at the World Juniors next year, so that'll be fun. But but like, you know, you go like Germany, I don't really think there's a whole lot going on there this year. At least not in Germany. Like Norway, the Solberg thing is a pretty good example. I'll be very curious about a bunch of guys in the Russian junior leagues and where they're going to go. Because I think a lot of them sort of are flying under the radar a little bit, especially the ones that play not for one of the major programs. There's a guy, Fyodor Avramov, who plays for Kapitan Stupino, which is like they were in the top division in the Moscow region, but they were the worst team in that division. But he was their leading scorer, I believe, or at least very close to it. 6'2", big winger, got a lot of skill, great shot. That's a guy who is ranked 59th in Europe on Central Scouting list, like 4th round pick, one of those fourth round picks. Like, I don't know how many people have seen him play because he plays on a team that no one cares about. Like it's Sochi's farm team, right? So like who cares?
Yeah.
So he's an example of that. So I'm curious about the Russian junior guys. I'm also curious, like I love guys also who are teammates of really highly touted players, so they kind of don't get the attention. And one of those guys is Topias Heinonen, who plays for Ukraine with Konsta Helenius, who probably will go top 10, top 15, something like that. I'm not a huge fan of Konsta Helenius as he is. But I watched Topias Heinonen and I go, yeah, I could see this guy being an energy winger in the NHL. He plays center as well. I don't think he projects super well as a center, but he's 5'10", but plays like he's 6'3", fast, tenacious. He's got some skill too. I think he's got, something there where if you leave him in Finland for a few more years and help him get more confident, which he definitely has gotten over the course of this season, I think you can end up with a nice pickup there. And he's a guy who also could be available really, really late. So he's in a very visible league, but the eyes aren't necessarily on him nearly as much as a guy who he sometimes even shares the ice with. And I just get the feeling that he's the guy who's mucking it up, getting the dirty work done so that a guy like Konsta Helenius can float into open space in the offensive zone and get past the puck and make a play and score some points.
That was a very pointed float. That
he does
volumes.
Do that sometimes, but I mean, that's his game, right? Like Konsta Helenius, that's kind of his game. It's very tactical, very planned. He does get physical, but a lot of it is, I'm going to make the right play. I'm going to put myself in the right spot. I'm going to not really overthink it and blah, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a derogatory way.
No. I get that.
Way, right?
Yeah. And aside from some of the players that we've already talked about today, are there any players who you really like to watch, like a Gleb Trikazov or a Marat Kuznetsov, who were your guys? Who's the Scouch guy this year?
Alphonse Frey, the Swedish defenseman. Again, everybody has their eyes on Leo Saline Wallenius, who's a bit bigger. They don't play on the same pair generally, but they play on the same team in Sweden. Neither of them played for the pro team this year. I don't know if that's because they want to play college, but Alphonse Frey rules. Like that guy he's been playing internationally and been, I think, their best defenseman in Sweden whenever I've seen them play internationally. I think he's just been outstanding with Vecchia. Like if you want to talk about offensive defensemen, like we were talking about Yakimchuk and Perek earlier, and the way that offensive defensemen generate their offense, like Frey has the toolbox that I don't think anybody in the draft offensively has. Like the skill in defensively, I mean, like the skill level and like the sense of being able to shake off pressure with sort of head fakes and body fakes and quickness and stepping up from the blue line. And like if I was defending him, I'd have no idea what the hell to do, because he could go anywhere at any time. Like I've seen him throw cross crease passes. Like he'll take 2 steps. I think I saw him score an assist a couple weeks ago where he stepped up from the offensive blue line about 4 feet and just rifled a pass through like 3 sets of feet to the other side of the crease, where someone just lucky person was just there and tapped it in. Like tape to tape, like really, really impressive offensive player who, I mean, might be a 2nd round pick, maybe a 3rd round pick. And I get the feeling like he doesn't have like a billion points this year. He's got 14 goals, but like, and he's producing pretty well. But I just, every time I've seen him play going back to last season, I've loved this guy. And I don't know, maybe he goes to the under 18s and everyone starts to like him just as much too. He'll probably be at that tournament, but that's the one I would point to and go, yep, that's the guy who, again, it's a draft where if I find a player I really, really like, I'll put him where I think he belongs. And if anyone else impresses me more than them, I'll put them ahead of the guy that I really, really like. But I just keep bumping guys down below this guy after I watch these other players. And I don't know. He's not super big, and like clearing the front of the net might not be the biggest strength of his, but if you don't have the puck and he does, like, you're in trouble. And I think that's very rare in this year's draft for defensemen. I think, like, genuinely you're in trouble. And I've loved him. And I just think he's a ton of fun. And where he's probably going to go in the draft, I mean, even if he doesn't work out, it's probably a really, 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 really good bet.
Interesting.
All right. Writing a letter to Mr. Steos. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sold on this guy.
I don't know. I mean, check him out. I mean, you'll probably see him at the under 18s, but I've been impressed every single game I've seen him this year. For sure. Just a really, really impressive player.
All right. Well, Will, let's end on a fun little note. At the beginning of this call, I was like, I'm going to hit a little sim lottery on Tankathon. Let's see where the Sens end up. It landed on pick number 2.
Okay.
So Celebrini goes off the board. You have your pick of the litter. And it doesn't have to be specific to Ottawa, but I guess for this example, we might as well. Who do you pick at number 2 if you have the keys to the draft at that slot?
Ivan Demidov. Easy pick to me. I adore him. I know that Ottawa generally doesn't draft a whole lot of Russians. I don't think they do at all.
That was very specifically because our owner was Ukrainian, and
Okay. Well, I think when you watch some Ivan Demidov highlights, you don't really care so much. He is just outstanding. Like, I don't know. I mean, he is, I think I think Macklin Celebrini will be a star in the NHL for his own reasons. He's a good, very well-rounded guy who can do everything. Very smart, very good puck handler, very good shooter, very good just across the board, like a Jonathan Taves style guy. But Ivan Demidov could be like on the cereal boxes. Like, he is a superstar.
Yeah, and I wanted to know, like, is he as close to Michkov as people have said?
I think it's tough. Like, Michkov, I think, like, is a much smarter player in the way that he uses the skill he's got. I think he manages the puck a lot better. I think he's quicker on his edges. Like, he's a lot more agile. But Demidov is just like a Ferrari, right? Like, Matvei Michkov might be like a, I don't know, like a high speed motorcycle, but Demidov Demidov is just a different animal. Like, the skill level, the raw skill level he has, the creativity and like the vision in the offensive zone is just ridiculous. Like across the board, he's just been pinning my offensive numbers. I think since the new year, he's like 3 points a game or something in the Russian Junior League. Like it's so dumb. I've done games with him, a couple of games. I did one game with him that was so unbelievable that I did a different game against the next best team in his division, because the first game he had 12 slot pass attempts in one game, which is really hard to do at 5-on-5 because I don't touch anything else other than 5-on-5. He just ripped that team apart. I think he had 4 points in that game. And I just went, okay, like I'll scratch this. I'll just say, okay, but whatever. It's an outlier. This one's probably an outlier. I did the next game. It was 9 or 10. Like he hit another gear after I think he kind of had a bit of a come to Jesus moment after having a tough start to the season in the KHL. He did not look ready for that at all, which I think is going to knock him a little bit to people. But pretty much within a couple of months of going back to junior, he kind of found his feet again, like he really cut down on give me the puck and I'm going to do whatever I want with it style of play. He's going a lot more north-south, attacking the net a lot more. He's timing his passes a lot more and a lot better. And I just love the guy. He's not that, Brady Tkachuk, Ridley Gregg, rah, go Sens go, type guy. But I don't think fans will care so much when he's filling the net and helping Brady Tkachuk also fill the net. Like that's a guy who I think just generates an insane amount of offense. And there's other players that I think could be very useful players, but I don't think any of them are going to be as exciting or skilled or fun as an Ivan Nemedov. And I mean, I remember Alexei Yashin wearing a Sens jersey and hating it as a Toronto guy when I was a kid. So Russians can work. It's happened before in Ottawa. And if it's Ivan Demidov, then I would not be a sad boy at all.
Yeah. Yashin was good. This other guy, you might know him, Kovalev, not so good in a Sens jersey.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Alex. Demidov is not Alex Kovalev. I'll say that. Yeah. Not a Kovalev.
I'm
not
glad he's leaning more towards the other side. I feel like a guy like that and Tim Stützle would be so fun to watch.
I think that would be that's a skilled hockey player's, like a fan of skilled hockey. That's a dream.
Yeah.
And if you're, and I know we're going to talk about a bit of roster moves at present tense, but like if you can move Chychrun to improve on your right side for D, and Demidov is your option, because I know that teams do have hesitance taking Russians, and right now that even more so.
Right.
If Ottawa decided they were going to go, big swing, that would definitely be a guy to get excited about, because man, him with Tim Stützle would be absolutely insane.
I don't even know if I'd put those two guys together. Like they're both just puck distributors, right? Like, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of the Senators this year. I love Tim Stützle. How could you not? Honestly?
Yeah,
I know, right? Like, how could I not? Well, I have my Mannheim jersey over there in the bin. So.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, like what you can hamstring and put caveats with the roster here and there and go, who's he going to play with? Who's he going to do this? At the end of the day, you just sort of go, assuming it's not Jacques Martin coaching a guy like Ivan Demidov, maybe someone a little bit more, of this generation. Someone who didn't know what the Great Depression was like. I feel like you could look at a guy like Demidov and go, I don't care about the roster so much because this guy just makes everybody good. He'll if Brady Tkachuk, just go to the net and slap hockey pads as good as you do that. Like that's your job now. And Demidov
and
will
enjoy your 50 goals.
Yeah, exactly. Have fun being Zach Hyman with a bit.
Yeah.
Oh
my God.
So enjoy. Because I've come a long way with Demidov. First couple of games I saw him, I went, oh no. And I just the last couple of months, I just kind of go, you know what? I don't really care so much about the problems. I kind of just see how he's sort of refined his game quite a bit and in a good way. And I just kind of, I don't know. There's nothing I can really poke holes in with his game anymore. Especially with, like, he was kind of hot dogging it quite a lot before. I think that's kind of gone. Definitely. He's definitely thinking a lot more. I see a thing in front of me, I'm going to try it, right? Rather than I'm going to swing wide, go around the perimeter, look for another option, hang on to the puck for another 5 seconds, and maybe give up the puck. Like, there's a lot less of that. And he's just been dominant, like a hugely dominant player. And definitely not challenged enough playing at the level he's playing at.
Cool. Well, Will, thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I know it took a long time to get you back, but it was desperately needed at this stage in the season. And I feel like now I know so much more about some of the players in this draft. So thank you so much for your insight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Always good to, always good to hop on, and always happy to see you guys. It's been a good, it has been a while. I did disappear for a while, but we're back and in action, and so it's been a lot of fun. So thanks for having me.
Do you want to plug your Scouching live streams while you're here?
Of course, yeah. So you can catch my live streams. There's 2 this week, or 2 a week now. There's Monday nights at 8 p.m. And Thursday afternoons. So the 21st of March is the next one at 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can go to scouching.ca. We have a new subscription plan up there, so you can access a bunch of data. You get early access to blog posts, all kinds of other fun stuff going on over there. So you can check out scouching.ca. I also run a business more tailored towards organizations called Fractal Hockey. So you can check that out at fractalhockey.com. Using a lot of this tracked data for the draft, especially, is kind of a lot of where that lives. So you can all check that all out there. And I'm again really happy to be on, and always a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll make sure to drop the links to your stuff in the description.
Beauty.
Cool. On that note, thank you all the Sens fans who tune in to watch or listen to this fun-filled hour of Scouching and Senstennial guys talking prospects. And we look forward to the draft, and hopefully Ottawa celebrates for Celebrini, and that won't happen, but
all of this would be moot then, right?
Yeah. But
what's it all been for? Just taking the consensus number 1?
Oh man. Okay. Well, Ottawa's only first overall pick they ever got was Chris Phillips. So I feel like we can really up.
That's not true.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Who was the other first overall?
Come on.
Alexander Day.
He was taken number 1.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he said
his documentary is literally called Chosen One.
He said at the draft, nobody remembers who goes number 2, blah, blah, blah.
By the way, Pronger?
Yeah, it was Pronger.
That documentary was incredible, by the way.
So good.
So good. Yeah.
So good.
Guys, I'm sorry, man. I'm slacking out here.
Damn.
Come on.
Wow.
I mean, I guess it's
Sens fans roast me in the comments. I respect it.
I bet people are just going to be like, yeah, we try to forget that draft too.
Matt and I both did the simultaneous eyebrow raise, like the rock thing. Like
maybe I just wanted to forget, guys. Maybe.
Honestly, I believe it. Yeah, honestly, yeah.
Not he, and I once again will say he's not even the worst first overall bust.
Nail Yakupov, anyone?
Yeah, no,
it's Yakupov. And Stefan.
Although Nail Yakupov had one of the best sellies ever.
Yeah, that was great. Elite.
And that was just to get a game to overtime. And people complain about other plays. But anyway, good night, folks. A little it's been real. Right. Insert animation. That's all, folks. Yeah. All right. Have a good night, everyone. And go Sens, go.
Sens.